Hello everyone, my name is Thomas Wright, but most folks just call me Tommy. I'm 85 years old now, and I'm recording this because there are some stories that need to be told before they're lost forever. This is my story, the truest thing I've ever lived through, and I'm sharing it because maybe, just maybe, someone out there needs to hear it. Pull up a chair, get comfortable, because this is going to take some time. And I promise you, every word of it is real. It was 1962. I was 23 years old, working at the Grand Pearl Hotel in downtown Chicago. Not one of those modern glass buildings you see everywhere today. This was old world elegance, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, the kind of place where men tipped their hats and women wore gloves. I was a bellhop back then, making barely enough to afford my little room above Mrs. Patterson's bakery on Fifth Street. I wore that burgundy uniform with pride, though. Kept my shoes shine like mirrors, stood up straight, treated every single guest like they were the most important person in the world. That's how my mama raised me, God rest her soul. She'd passed 2 years before, and working at that hotel was my way of honoring everything she taught me about dignity and hard work. It was a Tuesday evening in April when my whole life changed. I remember because it was the day after my birthday, and I'd worked a double shift to make some extra money. The lobby had that golden glow it always got when the evening sun came through those tall windows. I was helping old Mr. Henderson with his luggage, listening to him tell the same story about the war he told every week when the revolving door spun, and she walked in. I want you to understand something. I'm not a man given to exaggeration. I've lived a long life, seen a lot of things, and I don't believe in love at first sight like they show in the movies. But I'm telling you right now, when Elena Castellano walked into that lobby, time stopped. She wore a navy blue dress that fell just below her knees, with a string of pearls that caught the light. Her dark hair was pinned up in that elegant way women wore it back then, and when she walked, there was a grace to her that made everyone in that lobby turn and look. But it wasn't just her beauty that stopped me cold. It was something in her eyes, something kind and genuine, like she actually saw the world around her instead of just passing through it. I stood there like a fool, Mr. Henderson's suitcase still in my hand, just watching her walk to the front desk. She spoke to the clerk in a voice that was warm and soft like honey and tea. She was meeting her brothers for dinner in the hotel restaurant, she said. The clerk nodded, almost nervous, very respectful. That should have been my first warning about who her family was, but I was already too far gone to notice. Her name was Elena Castellano. I learned that by listening, by paying attention the way I'd never paid attention to anything in my life. Over the next few weeks, she came every Tuesday and Friday evening, always to meet her brothers, always in a different dress, but with that same grace, that same kindness in her eyes when she'd nod at the staff, when she'd say thank you like she really meant it. I started volunteering for every shift I could get. Came in early, stayed late, made sure I was always nearby when she arrived, ready to open the door, to offer an umbrella if it was raining, to simply exist in the same space as her. My buddy Marcus, who worked the front desk, used to shake his head at me. "Tommy," he'd say, "you got it bad for a girl who's way out of your leg. You know who her brothers are, don't you?" I didn't, not yet. And honestly, I don't think it would have mattered if I had. When you feel something that real, that pure, all the logic in the world doesn't stand a chance. One rainy evening in May, she dropped her handkerchief as she was leaving. It was white linen with little blue flowers embroidered in the corner. I picked it up and ran after her, catching her just as she reached the door. "Miss," I called out, my heart pounding, "you dropped this." She turned, and for the first time our eyes really met. She smiled, and I swear to you the whole world got brighter. It sounds foolish saying it now, but it's the truth. "Thank you," she said, taking it from my hand. Her fingers brushed mine for just a second, and I felt it like electricity. "You're very kind." "It's my job, ma'am," I managed to say, though my mouth had gone dry. "No," she said softly, still smiling. "Kindness is never just a job. Kindness is a choice." Then she was gone, leaving me standing there in the rain with the biggest, stupidest grin on my face. That was the moment I knew my life had changed forever. I had no idea then just how much it would cost me. No idea that this beautiful beginning would lead to the most painful ending I could ever imagine. But even knowing everything I know now, even after all these years, I wouldn't change a single thing. Because for a little while, I got to love Elena Castellano. And that, my friends, was worth everything. The next few weeks I lived for Tuesdays and Fridays. I know that sounds pathetic, organizing your whole life around catching glimpses of someone who barely knew you existed, but that's exactly what I did. I started learning everything I could about Alina without being obvious about it. In those days, you couldn't just type someone's name into a computer. You had to listen, observe, piece together information like a detective. And what I learned scared me to my core, but not enough to stop what was already growing in my heart. The Castellano family owned half the waterfront in Chicago. Alina's father, Salvatore Castellano, had died when she was just 12 years old, leaving everything to his 5 sons. Marco, the oldest, was 35 and ran the family businesses. Then came Vincent, Anthony, Roberto, and Frank, the youngest, who was still in his 20s. They owned shipping companies, restaurants, nightclubs. Legitimate businesses on paper, but everyone knew there was another side to their operations. They controlled things, if you understand my meaning. Protection rackets, gambling, loan sharking, things that happened in shadows, things that were whispered about but never discussed openly. The Castellanos weren't the biggest crime family in Chicago, but they were respected and feared in equal measure. Marcus pulled me aside one evening before my shift started. We were in the break room and his face was serious. "Tommy, I'm telling you this as a friend, man to man. You need to forget about that girl." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, but we both knew I was lying. Her brothers, they're not the kind of men you cross, and pursuing their sister, their baby sister, who they protect like she's made of glass, that would be crossing them in the worst possible way. "I'm not pursuing anyone," I said. "I'm just doing my job." "Yeah, and you do it with your heart on your sleeve every time she walks through that door. I see it. Charlie sees it. Eventually her brothers are gonna see it too, and when they do," he drew a finger across his throat. I should have listened to him. Any sane person would have, but the heart doesn't listen to logic, does it? The heart wants what it wants, and mine wanted Elena Castellano, so I kept showing up, kept greeting her with a smile, and slowly, carefully, we started having conversations. Little ones at first. She'd comment on the weather, I'd agree. I'd mention a new restaurant that had opened nearby. She'd thank me for the information. Small talk that probably meant nothing to her but meant everything to me. Then one day, about 3 months after that first meeting, something shifted. It was a Friday evening in July, hot as blazes outside. The hotel's air conditioning was struggling, and Alina arrived looking flushed from the heat. She wore a light green dress and carried a book under her arm. "Good evening, Miss Castellano," I said, opening the door for her. "Good evening, Tommy," she replied, and my heart skipped a beat because she'd used my name. She knew my name. "Is it always this hot in the city?" "Only in July and August, ma'am. The rest of the year we're freezing instead." She laughed, a real laugh, and it was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. "I suppose we can't have everything." I noticed the book then. Poetry. She looked surprised that I'd noticed, that I cared. "Yes, Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Do you read poetry, Tommy?" "Not as much as I should," I admitted, "but I know that one. How do I love thee, let me count the ways." Her eyes lit up, and for a moment we just stood there in the lobby, this poor bellhop and this rich man's daughter, connected by a few lines of poetry. "Most people think poetry is silly," she said quietly. "Most people are wrong about a lot of things," I replied. That was the beginning of something real between us. After that, our conversations got longer, deeper. She'd arrive early sometimes before her brothers, and we'd talk about books, about the city, about life. I learned that she volunteered at a children's hospital on weekends, that her favorite flowers were gardenias because they reminded her of her mother who'd passed away when Alina was 16, that she felt trapped sometimes in her golden cage of a life. And she learned about me too. About growing up poor on the South Side, about my mama who cleaned houses to put food on the table, about my dreams of becoming more than just a bellhop someday. I fell deeper in love with her every single day, and I started to suspect, to hope that maybe she was falling for me too. The way she'd smile when she saw me, the way she'd find excuses to stop by the hotel even when she didn't have plans with her brothers, the way she'd look at me when she thought I wasn't looking back. But I also became more aware of her brothers, watching them when they came for those family dinners. They were imposing men, all of them. Marco, the oldest, had cold eyes that seemed to calculate everything. Vincent was the enforcer, built like a brick wall. Anthony handled the business side, always in expensive suits. Roberto was the charmer, all smiles and jokes. And Frank, the youngest, had a wildness to him, a temper that everyone seemed careful around. They loved Elena, that much was obvious. The way they stood when she entered a room, the way they listened when she spoke, the protective glances they threw at any man who looked at her too long. She was their princess, their baby sister, the one pure thing in their complicated, dangerous lives. And I was a nobody bellhop who was falling in love with her. The smart thing would have been to walk away right then, to save myself the heartbreak and probably save my life too, but I didn't. Because sometimes you meet someone who makes you want to be brave, even when being brave might be the most foolish thing you could possibly do. That was Elena for me. She made me want to be brave. 6 months after I first saw Elena, I made a decision that would change the course of my entire life. I was going to prove myself worthy of her no matter what it took. I know how that sounds. Like some fairy tale nonsense, some poor boy thinking he can win the princess. But I'm telling you, when you find something real in this world, something that makes you want to be better than you are, you fight for it. You fight for it with everything you've got. I started by educating myself. I enrolled in night classes at the community college, studying business and literature. I'd work my shift at the hotel, then head to class, then come home and study until 2 or 3 in the morning. I was running on 4 hours of sleep most nights, but I didn't care. Every book I read, every fact I learned was another brick in the foundation I was building. I saved every penny I could, stopped eating out, stopped going to the movies, stopped doing anything that cost money. I kept it all in a coffee can under my bed, watching it grow nickel by nickel, dime by dime. I had a goal, you see. I was going to start my own business someday, something legitimate and successful, something that would make me more than just the help. Mr. Harrison, the hotel manager, noticed the change in me. He was a good man, fair, the kind who saw potential in people when others just saw their current circumstances. Right, he called me into his office one afternoon. Close the door and sit down. I did, my heart racing, wondering if I'd done something wrong. I've been watching you, he said, leaning back in his chair. You're different from the other boys who work here. You care about this job, really care. You treat every guest with respect, you're never late, never complain, and I hear you're taking classes at night. Yes, sir, business courses, he nodded, studying me. What's driving you, son? Most fellas your age are thinking about cars and girls, not bettering themselves. I couldn't tell him the whole truth, but I told him part of it. I don't want to be a bellhop forever, sir. No disrespect to the position, but I want to build something. I want to matter. He smiled then. How would you like to train for the concierge desk? It pays better, and frankly, you've got the temperament for it. The concierge needs to know the city inside and out, needs to solve problems, needs to make connections. I think you could excel at it. I couldn't believe it. The concierge was a respected position, required knowledge and skill. It was a real step up. I'd be honored, sir. Good, you start training Monday, and right, keep up those night classes. Education is never wasted. That promotion changed everything. As concierge, I interacted with a different class of people, business owners, politicians, wealthy travelers. I learned how they thought, how they operated, what mattered to them. And I started building a network of contacts, people who respected me for my competence and discretion. Elena noticed the change too. I was no longer the bellhop at the door. I was the concierge handling her brother's reservations, arranging for their cars, solving their problems. Me closer to her world, even if I was still on the outside looking in. One evening she approached my desk when no one else was around. It was early, before her brothers had arrived. Tommy, she said quietly, and I loved the way my name sounded in her voice. I heard about your promotion. Congratulations. Thank you, Miss Castellano. Elena, she corrected softly. When it's just us, please call me Elena. I glanced around, making sure no one was listening. That wouldn't be proper. Proper, she repeated with a sad little smile. My whole life is proper. Proper dresses, proper behavior, proper friends. Sometimes I feel like I'm suffocating in propriety. I wanted to reach across that desk and take her hand, wanted to tell her I understood, that I saw her, the real her, beneath all those expectations, but I couldn't, not here, not now, maybe not ever. I think, I said carefully, that being proper on the outside doesn't mean you can't be free on the inside. She looked at me for a long moment, and something passed between us, some understanding that didn't need words. You're different, Tommy, right? You see things differently than most people. I just see clearly, I said, and what I see is someone who deserves to be happy, not just proper. Before she could respond, the elevator dinged and her brothers emerged. She straightened up, that wall coming back up, becoming Miss Castellano again. But as she walked away, she glanced back at me once, and in that glance was everything we couldn't say out loud. Over the next year, I worked harder than I'd ever worked in my life. I became the best concierge in the city. Important people started asking for me specifically. I could get impossible reservations, find sold-out tickets, solve problems that seemed unsolvable. I was building a reputation, making myself valuable. And all the while, Elena and I were building something too. Something careful and precious and dangerous. Stolen conversations when she arrived early. Books we'd discuss, titles I'd recommend and she'd read. She started coming to the hotel even when her brothers weren't there, just to sit in the reading room, and I'd bring her tea and we'd talk about everything and nothing. I knew I was playing with fire. Her brothers had eyes everywhere. But I was careful, always professional in public, never crossing a line where anyone could see. Marcus, who confronted me again, pulling me into the back office one evening. You're in love with her, he said, not a question, a statement. I looked at my friend, this man who'd tried to warn me, and I couldn't lie anymore. Yes, I am. Tommy, this is going to end badly. Her brothers will never allow it. You know that, right? I know the odds are against me, I admitted. But what's the alternative? Spend my whole life wondering what if, never knowing if something this real could actually work. Her brothers will kill you, Marcus said bluntly. I'm not being dramatic, I'm not exaggerating. They will actually kill you if you pursue their sister. I'd thought about that, of course I had. Laid awake at night thinking about it, imagining all the ways it could go wrong. But I'd also thought about the alternative, about living my whole life safe and small and full of regret. Then I better make myself valuable enough that they won't want to, I said. That was my plan, you see. To become so respected, so connected, so valuable that even the Castellano brothers would have to think twice. It was ambitious, maybe even arrogant, but it was all I had. What I didn't know was that Elena was doing the same thing in her own way, fighting for us in ways I wouldn't understand until much later. 2 years. That's how long Elena and I danced around what we both knew was true. 2 years of careful conversations, of stolen glances, of building something that couldn't be named in public. I was 25 now, making good money as senior concierge, respected in my field. I'd moved into a better apartment, bought my first real suit, started building savings in a real bank account instead of a coffee can. I was becoming someone, but I was still just a hotel concierge, and she was still Elena Castellano. It was a Tuesday evening in October 1964 when everything changed. I remember the date exactly, October 13th. The leaves were turning gold outside the hotel windows, and there was that crisp feeling in the air that made everything seem possible. Elena walked in alone, which was unusual. Her brothers had been more protective lately, always having someone with her. But tonight she was by herself, and I could see immediately that something was different. Her hands were trembling slightly, and there was a determination in her eyes I'd never seen before. She walked straight to my desk, not even pretending to be there for any other reason. "Tommy," she said quietly, urgently. I need to talk to you somewhere private." My heart started racing. In 2 years, we'd never been alone together anywhere private. It was too dangerous, too risky. "The reading room," I suggested. She shook her head. "Too many windows, too exposed. Is there somewhere else, please?" Fast, the rooftop terrace. It's closed for the season, but I have the key." We took the service elevator up, not speaking, just the hum of the machinery between us and the sound of our breathing. When we stepped out onto the terrace, the city spread below us like a blanket of lights just beginning to glow in the dusk. "Elena," I started, but she held up her hand. "Please, let me say this before I lose my courage." She turned to face me, and in the fading light I could see tears in her eyes. "For 2 years I've come to this hotel not because of my brothers, but because of you. I've told myself 100 different stories about why, made 100 different excuses, but the truth is simple and I'm tired of hiding from it." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. "I'm in love with you, Tommy Wright," she said, and the words hung in the air between us like something holy. "I love your kindness, your ambition, the way you see the world as something to improve instead of something to conquer. I love how you treat everyone with dignity, from the wealthiest guest to the person sweeping the floors. I love that you read Steinbeck and understand why stories matter. I love who you are, not what you have or where you come from. I love you." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stand there as this beautiful, incredible woman laid her heart bare. But she continued, tears spilling down her cheeks now. "I also know what my family is. I know what my brothers do, what they're capable of. I know that loving you puts you in danger, real danger. I've spent 2 years trying to talk myself out of this feeling, trying to be sensible, trying to protect you. But I can't anymore. I can't pretend. So I'm telling you now, and then I'm going to walk away because I won't be the reason you get hurt." She turned to leave, and something in me broke open. All the careful planning, all the professionalism, all the walls I'd built to protect us both came crashing down. "Elena, wait." She stopped but didn't turn around. Her shoulders were shaking. I walked to her, my whole body trembling. "I fell in love with you the first day you walked into this hotel. Every single thing I've done since then, every class I've taken, every improvement I've made, every step forward has been so that maybe someday I could be worthy of you." She turned then, her face wet with tears. "I know who your brothers are," I continued. "I know the danger, but I also know that love like this, real love, the kind that makes you want to be better than you are, doesn't come along twice in a lifetime, and I'd rather have one real moment with you than a lifetime of safety without you." "Tommy," she whispered, "they'll kill you, my brothers, when they find out they'll kill you. Then we'll make sure they don't find out, not yet. Not until I can prove to them that I'm worthy of you, that I can take care of you, that I'm not just some nobody trying to take advantage." "You're not a nobody," she said fiercely. "You're the best man I've ever known." I reached up and wiped the tears from her cheeks, the first time I'd ever really touched her. "Give me time," I said. "Give me time to build something real, to make myself valuable enough that your brothers will have to take me seriously. Can you do that? How much time?" "However long it takes, a year, 2 years, 5 years, if that's what's needed." She looked at me for a long moment, and then she smiled through her tears. "You really think you can win over my brothers? Marco has never approved of anyone in his life. Vincent trusts no one. Anthony only cares about business. Roberto would find it all amusing. And Frank has a temper that scares even me sometimes." "I know it seems impossible," I said. "But so does this, us standing here, and yet here we are." She laughed then, a real laugh despite the tears. "You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the most foolish." "Probably both," I admitted. She looked at me, really looked at me, and then she made a decision. She reached up, put her hand on my cheek, and kissed me. It was soft and sweet and terrifying and perfect. When we pulled apart, the whole world had changed. "5 years," she said. "I'll give you 5 years to make this work. Tommy, if it becomes too dangerous, if my brothers figure it out before you're ready, you have to promise me you'll walk away. You'll leave Chicago, start somewhere new, stay alive." "Elena, I can't promise that. Then I can't do this," she said firmly. "I need to know that if this fails, you'll survive it. Promise me." I looked into her eyes and saw that she meant it. She would walk away right now if I didn't promise. I promise, I lied because I already knew the truth. There was no walking away from this. There was no world where I could leave her and just start over somewhere else. This was it. This was everything. We talked for another hour on that rooftop, making plans, setting boundaries, figuring out how to love each other in secret while I worked to make myself worthy in public. It was the most honest conversation I'd ever had, the most real moment of my life. When we finally went back down, everything looked the same but felt completely different. I had a purpose now, a mission that mattered more than anything else ever had. I was going to win over the Castellano brothers. I was going to prove myself worthy of their sister, and God help anyone who got in my way. The next 3 years were the hardest and most purposeful of my life. I worked like a man possessed, because in a way I was possessed by love and determination and the desperate need to make an impossible dream real. I'd see Elena maybe twice a week, always at the hotel, always with careful distance in public. But we developed our own language, our own ways of communicating. A book left at the concierge desk meant she was thinking of me. A particular flower in the lobby arrangement meant I was thinking of her. We'd pass notes hidden in returned library books, write letters we'd burn after reading. It sounds romantic now, maybe even silly, but back then it was survival, it was everything. Kept climbing. Mr. Harrison retired and recommended me as the new hotel manager. At 26 years old, I became the youngest manager the Grand Pearl had ever had. It came with a salary that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier, respect in the community, connections that mattered. But it wasn't enough, not yet. I started investing in real estate, buying run-down properties and fixing them up. It was risky, using every penny of my savings, but I was good at it. I understood value, understood what people wanted. Within 2 years, I owned 4 properties generating rental income. I wasn't rich, not by Castellano standards, but I was building something real. The breakthrough came in the spring of 1967. I was 28 years old, and I just closed on my biggest property yet, a small apartment building near the waterfront. That's when I met Roberto Castellano, not at the hotel, but at a real estate auction. He didn't recognize me at first, didn't connect me to the hotel concierge his sister sometimes spoke to. We were just 2 men bidding on the same property, and I won. After the auction, he approached me. Roberto was the charmer of the family, always smiling, but his eyes were calculating. "You've got good instincts," he said, shaking my hand. "That property's worth twice what you paid for it." "I know," I said simply. "That's why I bought it." He laughed. "I like you. You're not intimidated." Most people stammer when they meet a Castellano. "Should I be intimidated?" "Probably," he said, still smiling. "But I appreciate that you're not." "Roberto Castellano. Tommy Wright," he repeated, and I saw recognition dawn in his eyes. "Wait, you work at the Grand Pearl. You're the manager now, right?" "That's right. Elena talks about you sometimes, says you're very efficient, very professional." He was studying me now, reassessing. "You're younger than I expected." "I started young," I said carefully. We talked for a few more minutes about real estate, about the city, about business. He gave me his card, told me to call him if I ever needed anything. It was a small opening, but it was an opening. I started seeing more of the Castellano brothers after that, not as the hotel manager serving them, but as a businessman operating in their world. Roberto would invite me to property viewings. Anthony started asking my advice about hotel investments. I was careful, always respectful, always professional, never pushing too hard. But Elena and I couldn't risk being seen together outside the hotel. The waiting was agony. 3 years of stolen moments, of careful words, of loving someone I could barely touch. There were nights I'd lie awake, wondering if I was crazy, if this was all for nothing. Then I'd see her at the hotel, and she'd smile at me in that secret way, and I'd know it was all worth it. One evening, Marco Castellano himself came into the hotel. The oldest brother, the head of the family, the one with cold eyes that saw everything. He'd been to the hotel before, of course, but always for family dinners. This time he came alone and asked specifically for me. Mr. Wright, he said, I'd like to speak with you privately. My heart nearly stopped. This was it. Somehow he'd found out about Elena and me, and this was where it ended. We went to my office, and he closed the door. He was a big man, intimidating, with a presence that filled the room. My brothers speak well of you, he said. They say you're smart, discreet, trustworthy. I try to be, sir. I've been asking around about you. You grew up poor, worked your way up from bellhop to hotel manager. You're educated, you invest wisely, you keep your word. Is this accurate? Yes, sir, he nodded slowly. Do you know what I value most in this world, Mr. Wright? No, sir. Loyalty and family. Everything else is negotiable, but those two things are sacred. I didn't know where this was going, so I just waited. My sister speaks well of you too, he said, and my blood ran cold. She says you're kind to the staff, that you treat everyone with respect. She says you're an educated man who reads good books. Your sister is very perceptive, I managed to say. Yes, she is, he leaned forward. She's also the most important person in my world. My brothers and I, we've protected her all her life. After our mother died, she became our responsibility, our purpose. You understand what I'm saying? I believe so, sir. I hope you do, because I'd hate for there to be any misunderstanding about how seriously we take that responsibility. It was a warning clear as day. He knew something, suspected something, and he was letting me know that one wrong move would be my last. I understand completely, Mr. Castellano. Your sister deserves every protection and respect. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Good, I'm glad we had this talk. He stood to leave, then turned back. You know, Mr. Wright, there are very few men in this world who I believe are genuinely good. Most people are out for themselves, playing angles, but you might be one of the rare ones. Don't make me regret thinking that. After he left, I sat in my office for an hour, shaking. He knew. Maybe not everything, but he suspected, and he was watching. I met Elena that night on the rooftop terrace, our secret place. I told her about the conversation with Marco. He knows, I said, or suspects. She was quiet for a moment. Marco knows everything. He probably knew about us from the beginning. Then why hasn't he stopped it? Because he's watching you, testing you. My brother doesn't just care about wealth or status. He cares about character. He's been watching to see what kind of man you are, how you conduct yourself when you think no one is looking. What does he see? I asked. She smiled. He sees what I see, a good man who works hard and keeps his word, a man who might actually be worthy of his sister. I'm not worthy of you, I said honestly. I never will be. That's exactly why you are, she replied. We had 2 more years before our self-imposed deadline, 2 more years to make this work. And now I knew I wasn't just working against the clock. I was working under the watchful eyes of the most dangerous men in Chicago. The bridge I was building to Elena's world was getting stronger, but I still had no idea if it would hold when I finally tried to cross it. It happened on a cold evening in December 1968. I was 30 years old, had just purchased my 7th property, and was starting to be known in Chicago's business circles as a man on the rise. Young, ambitious, but also fair and honest. It was a reputation I'd built carefully, brick by brick. I was in my office at the hotel when Roberto Castellano walked in, but this time his usual smile was gone. He looked serious, almost nervous. Tommy, he said, my brothers and I would like to invite you to dinner, family dinner, this Sunday. My heart stopped. In all the years I'd known the Castellanos, I'd never been invited to a family dinner. Business meetings, yes. Casual conversations, certainly, but not the Sunday family dinner which was sacred to them. I'd be honored, I said, keeping my voice steady. There's something you should know, Roberto continued. Elena will be there, and after dinner we'd like to have a serious conversation with you. He didn't need to say more. This was it. They were going to confront me about Elena, and I was either going to walk out of that dinner with their blessing or not walk out at all. I understand, I said. That week was the longest of my life. I couldn't tell Elena about the invitation because we'd agreed to minimize contact until I was ready. So I prepared alone, thinking through everything I'd say, everything I'd need to prove. Sunday came. I wore my best suit, the navy one I'd bought for important business meetings. I drove to the Castellano estate in my car, a modest Ford that I kept immaculate. As I pulled up to the mansion, my hands were sweating despite the December cold. The house was magnificent, 3 stories of brick and stone, with columns at the entrance and windows that glowed warm in the winter dusk. A man I didn't recognize answered the door, clearly security, and led me through a marble foyer into a dining room that was bigger than my entire apartment. All 5 brothers were there, standing when I entered. Marco at the head of the table, Vincent to his right, Anthony to his left, Roberto and Frank at the far end. And there, in a blue dress that made her look like an angel, was Elena. Our eyes met for just a second, and I saw fear and hope mixed together. "Mr. Wright," Marco said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Castellano. Please sit." He gestured to a chair directly across from Elena, which meant I'd have to look at her throughout dinner and somehow maintain my composure. The meal was incredible, course after course of Italian food that Elena later told me was their mother's recipes, but I barely tasted it. I was too focused on the conversation, on presenting myself well, on not giving anything away. They asked me about my business, my properties, my plans for the future. Marco wanted to know about my education, what I'd studied, what I thought about politics and the economy. Vincent asked about my background, my family, making sure I understood he'd done his research. Anthony questioned my business ethics, presenting hypothetical scenarios to see how I'd respond. I answered honestly, directly, never trying to be someone I wasn't. If I didn't know something, I said so. If I disagreed with something, I said that too, respectfully but firmly. Roberto asked the most personal questions, about my mother, about growing up poor, about what drove me. "What do you want from life, Tommy?" he asked. "What's the end goal for all this work you're doing?" I glanced at Elena just for a second. "I want to build something that matters. I want to be the kind of man who keeps his promises and takes care of the people he loves. I want to be worthy of the blessings I've been given." Frank, the youngest and most hot-headed, had been quiet throughout dinner, just watching me with suspicious eyes. Finally, he spoke. "You ever been in a fight, right?" "Frank," Marco said warningly. "No, I want to know. You grow up poor on the south side. You must have fought." "Yes," I said, "I've fought. You any good? Good enough to survive?" He nodded, seeming to respect the honest answer. After dinner, Marco stood. "Elena, would you excuse us? We need to speak with Mr. Wright privately." She looked at me, worry clear in her eyes, but she nodded and left. I watched her go, wondering if I'd ever see her again. The brothers led me to a study, dark wood and leather chairs, cigar smoke hanging in the air. Marco closed the door, and suddenly the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Let's stop pretending," Marco said, sitting behind a massive desk while his brothers stood around me. "You're in love with our sister. There was no point denying it." "Yes, sir, I am." "For how long?" 6 years, since the first day I saw her." Vincent stepped closer, intimidating. "And you thought you could just pursue her without asking our permission? You thought we wouldn't notice?" "I didn't pursue her," I said carefully. "Not at first. I worked on myself, tried to become the kind of man who might someday deserve her. I never touched her, never disrespected her, never put her in a compromising position." "But you love her," Anthony said, "and she loves you. Don't deny that either." I met his eyes. "I won't deny it. Yes, she loves me. And I love her more than my own life." Frank moved forward, anger in his eyes. "You're a nobody, a hotel manager who owns a few buildings. What makes you think you're good enough for a Castellano?" "Nothing," I said simply. "Nothing makes me good enough for her. She's extraordinary, and I'm just a man who got lucky enough to know her. But I promise you this, I will spend every day of my life trying to be worthy of her. I will protect her, respect her, give her everything I have and everything I'll ever build. I will love her with everything in me until the day I die." The room was silent. Marco studied me for a long moment. "Do you know what we do, Mr. Wright? Really do?" "Yes, sir, I know." "And does that bother you?" I chose my words carefully. "I don't judge you for the choices you've made to protect your family. I understand that the world isn't black and white." But I also need you to understand that I will never be part of that side of your business. I'm building something legitimate, something clean, and that's the world I'll bring Elena into. And you think we'd allow that? Vincent said. You think you can just take our sister away from her family? I would never take her away from you, I said firmly. You're her brothers, her family. I know how much she loves you. But I'm asking for your blessing to love her too, to marry her, to build a life with her. A life that includes you, not excludes you. Marco stood and walked to the window, looking out at the winter night. 6 years, he said quietly. 6 years you've worked, built yourself up, never once stepping out of line. 6 years of patience. It would have been 60 years if that's what it took, I said. He turned back to me. Do you know why I invited you here tonight? To tell me to stay away from Elena, I assumed. No, he smiled slightly. If I wanted you to stay away from Elena, you'd already be gone. I invited you here because my sister has been miserable for 6 years, trying to hide how much she loves you, trying to be dutiful while her heart is breaking. And because I've spent 6 years watching you, testing you, waiting for you to prove yourself unworthy so I'd have a reason to end this. My heart was pounding, but you didn't, he continued. You kept working, kept building, kept being exactly who you claimed to be. You're honest, you're loyal, you treat people with respect. You've never tried to use Elena to get close to our family business, never tried to leverage her name for your benefit. You just loved her quietly and patiently while making yourself into a man who might actually deserve her. Vincent stepped forward. That doesn't mean we trust you completely. I wouldn't expect you to, I said. Trust is earned over time. All I'm asking for is the chance to earn it. Anthony spoke up. If you marry our sister, you become family. That means we protect you, but it also means we expect loyalty. Can you give us that? My loyalty will always be to Elena first, I said honestly. But yes, as her family, you have my loyalty too. Roberto smiled. I told you guys he'd say that. Marco looked at each of his brothers, some silent communication passing between them. Then he turned back to me. My brothers and I have discussed this. We have conditions. I'm listening. First, you will continue to build your business legitimately. We don't want Alina anywhere near our other operations. Second, you will sign a prenuptial agreement protecting her inheritance. Third, you will respect our family traditions and keep Alina connected to her roots. And fourth, if you ever hurt her, betray her, or cause her pain, there's nowhere on earth you can hide from us. I didn't hesitate. I agreed to all of it. Then you have our blessing, Marco said. Welcome to the family, Tommy Wright. I couldn't speak. 6 years of work, of waiting, of hoping, and it had actually worked. I'd won them over. Vincent extended his hand. Don't make us regret this. I shook it firmly. I won't, sir, I promise you that. One by one, each brother shook my hand, even Frank, though he still looked skeptical. Can I see Elena? I asked. Can I tell her? Marco smiled. She's waiting in the garden. She's been waiting for 6 years. I think it's time she stopped waiting. I walked through the house in a daze, through the French doors into the winter garden. She was there, wrapped in a coat, looking at the frozen fountain. She turned when she heard me, fear and hope on her face. Tommy, I walked to her, took her hands in mine. They said yes, Elena, they said yes. She started crying, laughing, pulling me into her arms. Are you serious? They really said yes. We can be together, really together. I can marry you. She kissed me then, right there in her brother's garden, and it was like every prayer I'd ever prayed had been answered all at once. I love you, she whispered. I've loved you for so long. I love you too, and now I get to spend the rest of my life showing you how much. We stood there in the cold, holding each other, and for the first time in 6 years, I let myself believe that happy endings were possible. I had no idea how wrong I was. I had no idea that our happiness had an expiration date, and it was coming faster than either of us could have imagined. I proposed to Elena properly 3 days later, with a ring I'd been saving for 2 years. It wasn't the biggest diamond, but it was clear and beautiful, and when I slipped it on her finger in that same rooftop terrace where we'd first confessed our love, she cried and said it was perfect. We were married in the spring of 1969 on a warm April day that felt like the world itself was celebrating with us. The wedding was at the Castellano estate in the garden where Elena's mother had been married, where her parents had exchanged their vows 35 years earlier. It was a big affair. The Castellanos didn't do anything small. 300 guests, flowers everywhere, a 10-piece band, food that seemed endless, but I barely noticed any of it. All I saw was Elena walking down the aisle in a white dress, her brothers walking with her since their father was gone, and the look on her face when she saw me waiting at the altar. I'm not ashamed to tell you I cried when I said my vows. After all those years of waiting, of working, of hoping, she was finally mine and I was finally hers, standing in front of God and everyone, making promises I meant with every fiber of my being. Marco gave a toast at the reception that surprised me. I've spent 6 years watching Tommy Wright, he said, waiting for him to prove himself unworthy of my sister. I'm happy to say he never did. He worked hard, stayed honest, and loved Elena with a patience that humbled me. I've learned that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone you love is trust their choice even when it scares you. Tommy, you take care of our sister, and Elena, you've chosen well. Even Frank, who'd been the most skeptical, pulled me aside during the reception. I still don't fully understand what she sees in you, he said, but he was smiling. But she's happy, happier than I've ever seen her, so you must be doing something right. We honeymooned in Italy, 2 weeks in Tuscany that felt like a dream. We stayed in a villa overlooking vineyards, drank wine and ate pasta and made love like we were the only two people in the world. Elena laughed more than I'd ever heard her laugh, relaxed in a way she never had in Chicago. Is this real? She asked me one evening as we sat on the terrace watching the sunset. Is this really our life now? It's real, I said, pulling her close, and it's just the beginning. When we returned to Chicago, we moved into a house I'd bought in a good neighborhood, nothing too fancy but solid in ours. I continued managing the hotel and growing my real estate investments. Elena started teaching at an elementary school, something she'd always wanted to do but her brothers had discouraged because they thought it was beneath her. I don't want to just exist, she told them. I want to matter, to make a difference. They let her because they couldn't deny her anything and because now she had a husband to protect her. That was me. That was my job, and I took it seriously. We had Sunday dinners with her brothers every week. It was strange at first, sitting at that table as family instead of as an outsider trying to prove myself. But gradually I became one of them. Roberto and I went to property auctions together. Anthony asked my advice on hotel investments. Even Vincent warmed up to me, appreciating that I kept my word and stayed out of their other business. Marco and I developed a real friendship. He'd come by the hotel sometimes, and we'd talk about business, about life, about responsibility. He told me once that watching me work for Elena had reminded him what love was supposed to look like. I never married, he said, too busy protecting the family, building the business. But seeing you and Elena, seeing what real love looks like when it's patient and true, makes me think maybe I missed out on something important. It's not too late, I told him. He smiled sadly. For some of us it is, but that's okay. Seeing my sister happy, that's enough for me. Elena got pregnant in the fall. We found out in October, and I swear I felt like my heart might explode from happiness. We told her brothers at Sunday dinner, and the whole table erupted in celebration. Frank brought out champagne, Roberto started planning the nursery, Anthony wanted to set up a trust fund immediately, but it was Marco's reaction that got me. This tough, cold man who ran a criminal empire actually had tears in his eyes. Our mother would be so happy, he said quietly. A new generation, family continuing. That winter was magic. Elena would put my hand on her belly and let me feel the baby kick. We'd talk for hours about names, about what kind of parents we wanted to be, about the future we were building. We painted the nursery pale yellow, gender neutral, and filled it with books because Elena insisted our child would grow up loving stories like we did. The brothers were over all the time, bringing baby gifts, arguing about whether it would be a boy or girl, already planning this child's future. Even Frank, the hot-headed one, would sit with Elena and talk gently to her belly, telling the baby about family traditions. I was 31 years old, married to the love of my life, expecting my first child, successful in business, accepted by her family. For the first time in my life, everything was perfect. I should have known it couldn't last. I should have known that perfect is a fragile thing, especially in a world as dark as the one the Castellanos lived in. But I didn't know. I was too happy, too grateful, too focused on the beautiful life we were building to see the shadows gathering. One evening in March 1970, I came home from the hotel to find Elena sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale. She was 6 months pregnant, beautiful and glowing, but something was wrong. "What is it?" I asked, immediately concerned. Marco called. "He wants all of us at the estate tomorrow night, special family dinner. He said it was important." "Did he say why?" She shook her head. "But Tommy," he sounded worried. I've never heard Marco sound worried. A chill went through me, but I pushed it aside. "I'm sure it's nothing. Maybe he has an announcement." But it wasn't nothing. And that dinner would be the last time we were all together, the last time Elena smiled at her brothers, the last time I saw her eyes light up with joy. Because sometimes the shadows don't just gather, sometimes they consume everything. The next evening we drove to the Castellano estate. Elena was quiet in the car, her hand resting on her pregnant belly, that worried look still on her face. I held her other hand, trying to reassure her, but I felt uneasy too. When we arrived, all the brothers were already there, and I immediately knew something was seriously wrong. Marco's face was hard, Vincent was pacing, Anthony looked grim, Roberto wasn't smiling, and Frank kept clenching and unclenching his fists. "What's going on?" Elena asked as soon as we walked in. Marco stood and came to her, kissing her forehead. "Sit down, Piccola, we need to talk." We all gathered in the dining room, but this wasn't like the usual Sunday dinners. The table wasn't set for a meal. This was a meeting. Marco began without preamble. "There's been a development. Salvatore Russo, the one who's been trying to muscle in on our territory, has escalated things. He's made threats, specific threats." "What kind of threats?" I asked. Vincent answered, his voice tight with anger. "Against family, against Elena specifically." My blood ran cold. Elena's hand tightened on mine. "Why Elena?" she asked quietly. "I'm not involved in the business." "Because you're our weakness," Marco said gently. "Russo knows we'd do anything to protect you. He's trying to use you as leverage." "So what do we do?" Frank asked, always ready for action. "We handle it," Marco said firmly. "But Elena, you and Tommy need to be extra careful. No going out alone, no set routines. I'm assigning security." "Marco," Elena protested, "I'm pregnant. I have doctor appointments, school." "You'll take a leave from teaching," Anthony interrupted, "just until this is resolved." "And how long will that take?" I asked. The brothers exchanged glances. Roberto answered, "Russo's been a problem for 2 years. He's careful, smart. This could take time." "So what?" Elena said, frustrated. "I'm supposed to hide in my house for months, maybe years. That's not living. It's surviving," Marco said, "and right now that's what matters." We argued for another hour, but the brothers were united. Elena would have protection, would limit her exposure, would be careful. And I would be watched too, because I was family now, and hurting me would hurt Elena. Drove home in silence that night. When we got inside, Elena sat on the couch and started crying, really crying, her hands on her belly. "This is the life I was born into," she said through tears. "I thought marrying you would let me escape it, but it never ends, does it? The danger, the looking over your shoulder, the fear." I held her, feeling helpless. "Your brothers will handle it, they always do." "But at what cost?" she asked. "How many more enemies? How much more violence? When does it stop?" I didn't have an answer. Over the next 2 weeks, we adjusted to our new reality. 2 security guys followed Elena everywhere. I varied my route to work, stayed alert, kept my distance from anyone suspicious. The brothers were busy having meetings, making calls, doing whatever it was they did to handle threats. Then on a Tuesday evening, Marco called me at the hotel. "Tommy, I need you to do something for me. Anything. Keep Elena at your house tomorrow night, all night. Don't let her leave, no matter what." "Why, what's happening?" We're meeting with Russell tomorrow trying to negotiate peace, but if it goes wrong, if things escalate, I need to know Elena is safe at home with you." "Marco, maybe you shouldn't. This is the only way to end it," he interrupted. "We talk, we make a deal, everyone walks away. It's the civilized solution." But there was something in his voice that worried me. "Where's this meeting happening?" "The warehouse on Pier 17, neutral ground." "We've done this 100 times, Tommy. It'll be fine. Let me come with you." "No, you're not part of this business, remember. That was the deal. You stay clean, stay with Elena. That's how you protect her." He was right, and I knew it. "Okay, I'll keep her home." "Good. And Tommy, if something goes wrong, if you don't hear from me by midnight, you take Elena and you run, you hear me? You take her and the baby and you disappear." "Marco, promise me." "I promise." I drove home that night with a knot in my stomach. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Elena knew immediately that something was up. What did Marco want? I couldn't lie to her. "He asked us to stay home tomorrow night. He's meeting with Russo to negotiate." Her face went pale. "No, no, they can't trust Russo. He's dangerous, Tommy. My brothers are walking into a trap. They know what they're doing. They've handled situations like this before." "Like this," she insisted. "Russo is different. He's crazy, Tommy. He doesn't follow the rules." We argued about it, but ultimately there was nothing we could do. Her brothers had made their decision. The next day dragged on forever. I stayed home from work, and Elena was too anxious to do anything but pace. The security guards were outside, and every hour felt like an eternity. At 6 o'clock, Marco called. "We're leaving for the meeting now. Should be back by 10. I'll call you when it's over." "Careful," I said. "Always am, brother." He paused. "Tommy, you've been good for our family, good for Elena. Thank you for that." "Marco, I'll talk to you soon." He hung up. Elena and I sat in the living room watching the clock. 7 o'clock passed, 8, 9. She held my hand so tight it hurt, and I could feel the baby moving under her other hand, restless like its mother. At 9:47, the phone rang. I grabbed it immediately. "Hello." It was Roberto, and his voice was wrong, shaking. "Tommy, you need to sit down." "What happened? Is Marco okay?" "Tommy, please sit down." I sat, and Elena was beside me immediately, reading my face, knowing. "It was a setup," Roberto said, and I heard tears in his voice, this man who I'd never seen cry. "Russo brought 20 guys. We didn't stand a chance. Marco, Vincent, Anthony, Frank, they're gone. They're all gone." The words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense. "What do you mean gone?" "Dead, Tommy. They're dead. All of my brothers are dead." The phone slipped from my hand. Elena grabbed it, listened for just a second, then let out a sound I'd never heard from her, a wail of pure anguish that seemed to tear her apart. She collapsed, and I caught her, both of us falling to the floor, holding each other while the world ended around us. Her brothers, her protectors, her family, all gone in one night, one betrayal, one moment of misplaced trust. And then Elena screamed, a different kind of scream, and I saw blood and realized the stress, the shock was causing something terrible. "The baby," she gasped. "Tommy, the baby." I called an ambulance, held her while we waited, prayed to God I wasn't sure was listening. They were the longest 7 minutes of my life, but they weren't long enough to save our child. By the time we got to the hospital, it was too late. We lost the baby that night, a little girl. Elena got to hold her just for a moment, this perfect, tiny thing who would never open her eyes, never take a breath. "Maria," Elena whispered, naming her after her mother. "Her name is Maria." In one night, Elena lost her 4 brothers and her daughter. In one night, everything we'd built, all the happiness we'd found, shattered into pieces so small I didn't know if they could ever be put back together. I held my wife while she broke, and I broke with her, and I understood for the first time that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes the world is just too cruel. I'm going to tell you what the next year was like, and I need you to understand that I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm telling you because grief is part of this story, and if I skip over it, you won't understand what came after. Elena didn't speak for 3 days after we lost Maria and her brothers. She'd just lie in the hospital bed, staring at nothing, tears running down her face. The doctors were worried about her physically, but I was worried about her soul. I could see her disappearing into that grief, drowning in it. Roberto survived because he'd been running late to the meeting. He walked in just as the shooting started and managed to escape. He was the one who identified his brother's bodies, the one who arranged the funeral, the one who held everything together while falling apart inside. The funeral was massive. Hundreds of people came to pay their respects to the Castellano brothers. Important people, dangerous people, regular people whose lives the brothers had touched, and they were all there except the one person who should have been Elena. She was still in the hospital, physically recovering, emotionally destroyed. The doctors said the stress had caused a placental abruption, that there was nothing we could have done, that it wasn't anyone's fault, but Elena blamed herself. Blamed herself for the stress, for not being stronger, for not protecting our daughter. I buried our baby girl, Maria, in a white coffin so small it broke something in me. She was laid to rest near Elena's mother in the family plot. I stood there alone because Elena couldn't bear to come, and I said goodbye to the daughter I'd never get to know. When Elena finally came home from the hospital, she was a ghost. She'd sit in the nursery we'd painted, in the rocking chair we'd bought, surrounded by stuffed animals and books, and just stare at the empty crib. I didn't know how to help her. I'd hold her, tell her I loved her, remind her that we still had each other. But she was somewhere I couldn't reach, trapped in a grief so profound it had swallowed her whole. Roberto came by often those first few months. He was grieving too, but he channeled it into rage, into finding Russo, into getting revenge. He wanted me to help, wanted to use my connections, my knowledge of the city. "We have to make him pay, Tommy," he'd say. "For my brothers, for your daughter, for Elena, we have to end him." But I couldn't, not because I didn't want Russo dead, God forgive me, I did, but because I'd promised Elena's brothers I'd stay clean, stay legitimate, stay out of that world. And more than that, I knew that revenge wouldn't bring them back, wouldn't heal Elena, wouldn't change anything. "I can't," I told Roberto. "I'm sorry, but I can't." He looked at me with disappointment and anger, and our friendship, which had grown over the years, cracked. He stopped coming around after that. 3 months after the tragedy, Elena finally spoke more than a few words. "I want to leave Chicago," she said one night as we lay in bed. "I can't be in this city anymore, Tommy. Everywhere I look, I see them. The restaurant where we had Sunday dinners, the estate where we celebrated, the hospital where Maria died. I can't breathe here. Where do you want to go?" "Anywhere, somewhere quiet, somewhere with no memories." So we left. I sold my properties, sold the hotel management contract, packed up our life and moved to a small town in upstate New York. A place where nobody knew the Castellano name, where nobody knew our story, where we could try to rebuild in peace. We bought a small house near a lake. I opened a bookstore, something simple and quiet. Elena started painting, something she'd never done before, these dark, emotional pieces that were her grief made visible. For a year we existed. We didn't really live, we just existed, moving through days that all felt the same. We were polite to each other, gentle, careful, but the easy joy we'd had was gone. The laughter had died with our daughter and her brothers. I'd catch Elena sometimes, standing at the window, her hand unconsciously resting on her stomach where Maria had been, tears running down her face. And I'd go to her, hold her, and we'd cry together, but it didn't make it hurt less. On the first anniversary of that terrible night, we drove to a church we'd never been to and lit candles, 5 for her brothers, 1 for our daughter. We sat in that quiet space, and Elena finally spoke the words she'd been holding inside. "I'm angry at them," she whispered, "at Marco, at all of them. They knew Russo was dangerous. They knew it could be a trap, but they went anyway, and they left me. They left us. And I hate that I'm angry at dead people, at people I loved more than anything, but I'm so angry." "That's okay," I said. "Anger is part of grief." "Is it?" She turned to me, and her eyes were red but clear. "Or is anger just easier than admitting that the world is random and cruel and doesn't care about good people or love or happy endings?" I didn't have an answer, because she was right. The world had proven itself cruel, had taken everything good we'd built and crushed it for no reason other than bad timing and worse luck. We sat in that church for hours, not praying exactly, just being. And when we finally left, something had shifted. We'd acknowledged the anger, the pain, the terrible unfairness of it all, and somehow that acknowledgement made it just a little easier to carry. "I don't know how to be happy again," Elena said as we drove home. "I don't even know if I want to be." "Me neither," I admitted, "but maybe we don't have to be happy. Maybe we just have to keep going, keep loving each other, keep honoring their memory by living." She took my hand. "You're still here. After everything, you're still here with me." "Where else would I be?" I said. "You're my wife, you're my whole heart. Broken or not, I'm yours." That night, for the first time in a year, we really talked about Maria, about her brothers, about the guilt and the anger and the grief. We cried until there were no tears left, held each other until morning light came through the windows. And in that dawn, we made a quiet promise to each other. We would survive this. We would honor the ones we'd lost by actually living, not just existing. It wouldn't be the life we'd planned, wouldn't be the happy ending we'd worked so hard for, but it would be ours and it would be real. It took 3 more years before Elena smiled again, really smiled. It took 5 before we could talk about Maria without breaking. It took 10 before we could remember her brothers with more joy than pain, but we did it. We survived. And that survival, that choice to keep going even when everything was broken, that was its own kind of strength. I'm 85 years old now, recording this story in the same small house Elena and I moved to all those years ago. She passed away 2 years ago peacefully in her sleep, and I buried her next to a small memorial stone we'd placed for Maria. We never had other children. We tried, but it didn't happen, and eventually we accepted that Maria was our only baby, brief as her time was. Looking back over 65 years, people ask me if I have regrets. If I wish I'd never pursued Elena, never fallen in love with someone from that world, never put us both through the pain that followed. And I'll tell you the same thing I tell them. No, I don't regret a single moment. Let me explain why. Yes, Elena and I went through hell. We lost our daughter. She lost her brothers. We lost the future we'd planned, the happiness we'd worked so hard to build. The last 30 years of our marriage weren't the fairy tale the first year had been. We were marked by grief, shaped by loss, defined by survival as much as by love. But here's what I learned, what I need you to understand. Love isn't just about the happy moments. It's not just about the joy and the laughter and the perfect days. Real love, the kind that lasts, the kind that means something, is about choosing to stay when everything falls apart. Elena and I had one perfect year, 1 year of complete happiness. And then we had 50 years of choosing each other through pain, through grief, through days when just getting out of bed felt impossible. And those 50 years, as hard as they were, they mattered just as much, maybe more, because anyone can love someone when life is good. The real test is loving them when life is terrible, when you're both broken, when the world has taken its best shot at destroying you and you're still standing, still together, still holding on. I learned that grief doesn't end, but it does change. It becomes part of you, woven into who you are. Elena never stopped missing her brothers, never stopped mourning our daughter, but she learned to carry that grief without letting it destroy her. She learned to find moments of joy even in the sadness, to laugh again even though we'd lost so much. I learned that strength isn't about not breaking. It's about breaking and putting yourself back together again and again, as many times as it takes. Elena broke that terrible night. I broke too. But we helped each other heal piece by piece, day by day. We were never the same people we'd been before, but we became new people who could still love, still hope, still find meaning. I learned that happiness is precious because it's fragile. We had one perfect year, and I'm grateful for every single day of it. I don't take those memories for granted. The way Elena looked in her wedding dress, the feeling of her hand in mine on our honeymoon, the excitement in her eyes when she told me she was pregnant. Those memories sustained us through the dark years that followed. I learned that life doesn't owe you fairness. Elena was a good person. Her brothers, for all their faults, loved their family fiercely. Our daughter Maria never even got a chance at life. None of them deserved what happened, but the world doesn't work on deserve. Bad things happen to good people, and you can either let that destroy you or you can find a way to keep going despite it. I learned that love is a choice you make every day. There were days when Elena was so deep in her grief that she pushed me away. Days when I was so tired of being strong that I wanted to give up. Days when it would have been easier to walk away, to start over with someone new somewhere else, but I chose to stay. Every single day I chose her, and she chose me. That's what marriage is, that's what real love is, choosing each other even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I learned that you can survive things you never thought possible. Someone had told 23-year-old Tommy that he'd lose his only child, that his wife would lose her entire family in one night, that they'd spend decades working through that trauma together. I would have said it was impossible. I would have said no one could survive that, but we did. Humans are stronger than they know. We bend, we break, but we can also heal. Slowly, painfully, but we can heal. I learned that the people we love never really leave us. Elena talked to her brothers for the rest of her life. She'd have conversations with them in her mind, ask them for advice, tell them about her day. She kept their photos everywhere, told stories about them, made sure they weren't forgotten. And Maria, our baby girl we never got to know, she was always with us too. In the nursery we kept and eventually turned into a reading room. In the quiet moments when Elena would touch her stomach and smile sadly. In the scholarships we set up in her name for children's hospitals. I learned that meaning isn't something you find, it's something you create. After everything fell apart, Elena and I could have become bitter. We could have spent our lives angry at God, at the world, at fate. Instead, we created meaning. Elena taught painting to children, free classes in our home. I used the bookstore to create a community space where people could gather and feel safe. We volunteered, we helped others. We tried to make the small corner of the world we occupied a little better. It didn't bring back what we'd lost, but it gave us purpose. I learned that grief and love are two sides of the same coin. We grieve deeply because we love deeply. The pain Elena felt over losing her brothers was the price of having had them in her life. The agony of losing Maria was the cost of having created her even briefly, and I'd pay that price again. I'd go through all that pain again for one more day with the people we loved, because love, real love, is worth the grief that comes with it. Most importantly, I learned that the story doesn't end the way you think it will, but that doesn't make it any less beautiful. I thought my story with Elena would be a fairy tale. Poor boy meets rich girl, overcomes obstacles, wins her hand, lives happily ever after. That's how it should have ended, right? But that's not what happened. We got 1 year of happiness, then 50 years of something more complex, more real. We had joy and sorrow, hope and despair, triumph and tragedy all mixed together. We had ordinary Tuesdays and extraordinary moments. We had inside jokes and shared grief. We had a love that was tested in ways I never imagined and came through changed but unbroken. When Elena died 2 years ago, I held her hand just like I'd held it 60 years earlier when we first confessed our love. She looked at me with those same kind eyes, a little clouded with age, but still seeing me, really seeing me. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for staying. Where else would I go?" I said the same thing I'd always said. "You're my whole heart." She smiled. "We had a beautiful life, Tommy, not the one we planned, but beautiful anyway." She was right. It was beautiful, not despite the pain, but including it. The pain made the joy sweeter. The loss made the love more precious. The grief made us more human, more compassionate, more real. So when people ask me if I regret pursuing Elena, if I wish I'd played it safe and loved someone easier, someone from my own world, someone whose family wasn't dangerous, I tell them this: I loved Elena Castellano for 65 years. I loved her through one perfect year and 50 hard ones. I loved her when she was radiant with joy and when she was broken with grief. I loved her when loving her was easy and when it required everything I had. And I would do it all again, every heartbreak, every loss, every moment of pain, for the privilege of being her husband, of building a life with her, of learning what real love actually means. That's my story. That's what I want to leave behind, what I want people to understand. Love isn't a fairy tale. It's not always happy. It doesn't always work out the way you plan. But real love, the kind that chooses to stay even when staying is hard, the kind that survives tragedy and keeps going, the kind that honors what's lost while still finding joy in what remains. That kind of love is worth everything. Elena taught me that, her brothers taught me that, even Maria in her brief existence taught me that. They taught me that life is fragile and precious and unfair and beautiful all at once. They taught me that the only thing we really have is how we love each other, how we show up for each other, how we choose each other day after day. I'm an old man now, and I'll be joining Elena soon. I'm ready for that, ready to see her again, to hold her hand again, to tell her one more time that she was the best thing that ever happened to me. Ready to meet Maria, the daughter I never got to know, and tell her about the life her mother and I built in her memory. But before I go, I want to tell this story. Because maybe someone out there needs to hear it. Maybe someone is going through their own tragedy, their own loss, their own impossible situation, and they need to know that you can survive it. That love is stronger than grief. That choosing to stay, choosing to love, choosing to keep going even when everything is broken, that's the bravest thing a person can do. Elena and I didn't get our happy ending. We got something better. We got a real ending, an honest one. One that honored what we lost while celebrating what we had. One that proved love doesn't conquer all the bad things, but it helps you survive them. It helps you find meaning in the survival. It helps you become someone who can carry grief without being destroyed by it. That's my legacy. Not the properties I bought or the business I built or the money I saved. My legacy is choosing Elena every day for 65 years. My legacy is the love we built that was strong enough to survive anything. My legacy is proving that real love, imperfect and painful and beautiful, is always worth fighting for. Always. So to anyone watching this, anyone hearing my story, I want you to remember this. Life will hurt you. It will take things from you, break your heart, destroy your plans. But if you're lucky enough to find real love, if you're blessed enough to have someone who sees you and chooses you and stays with you through everything, hold on to that. Fight for it. Choose it every day. Because in the end, that's all we have. The people we love and the choice to keep loving them no matter what. That's what Elena taught me. That's what our life together meant, and I wouldn't change a single thing.